योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि। आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं। हरिः ओम्। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुर्गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। हरिः ओम्। Last time we started on Sutra 2.32, which enumerated the niyamas. The sutra was Shaucha, Santosha, Tapasvadhyayeshwara Pranidhanani Niyamaha. So we had started on Vyasa's Bhashya and we had looked at the first of the enumerated niyamas, which is Shaucha. And in the earlier sessions we have already looked at what is yamas collectively, what is niyamas collectively, how do they fit into the ashtangas of yoga, and so on. So for today we'll continue from where we left off. So we had seen the first line of Vyasa's commentary, Tatra Shaucham Mrujjaladichanitam Medhyabhya Vaharanadi Cha Bhayyam Abhyantaram Chittamalanam Akshalanam. So we will not go into that today, but we have looked at what is the external or the Bahya Shaucha and the internal so-called Abhyantaram Shaucham. Now we continue today to Santosha. So Vyasa says, Santoshaha Sannihita Sadhanat Adhikasya Anupaditsa is Santosha. So Vyasa again has concisely characterized and defined what Santosha is. So he says, Sannihita Sadhanat Adhikasya. Sannihita means whatever is available, whatever is close at hand, whatever is with us. Sadhana means the things, various things that we need to live life, for activities and so on. All the tools, utilities, whatever is, all the useful objects. So they are sadhana. So Sannihita Sadhanat Adhikasya. So which refers to anything more than whatever is available with us, close at hand. What about them? Anupaditsa means, Upaditsa means desire to obtain, desire to get. Again, this is one of those what's known as Sananta Padani. There's a suffix called, there's a suffix san in Sanskrit, which indicates a desire to do certain things. So we have seen Vivaksha, Mumuksha, Yuyutsa, and so on. So here, Upaditsa means wish to accumulate, wish to obtain, wish to get. So Anupaditsa is the opposite, not having any wish to obtain or get. That is Santosha. So Santosha is defined in terms of what it is not. So the absence of any desire to get, obtain, accumulate things other than what are already available. That is Santosha, which in other words is also being satisfied with whatever is available. So in Shandilya Upanishad, again there is a very short definition. It says Santosho Nama Yadruchha Labha Tushtihi. Yadruchha Labha means whatever one obtains without really wanting it, without really trying for it, whatever comes our way, having tushti with it, being satisfied with it. So Santosho Nama Yadruchha Labha Tushtihi. So that is santosha. So essentially, as Vyasa is saying, having no desire for anything other than whatever is available and close at hand. And the Upanishad elsewhere is saying, being satisfied with whatever comes on its own our way. So that is santosha. Even the Bhagavad Gita, in one of the lines, it is said, Yadrucha labha santushto dvandvatito vimatsaraha, where you are defining or characterizing a yukta person. So there again it is a yadrucha labha santushtaha. So this essentially is how santosha is being characterized. There is another, that reminds me of, there is one shloka, a couple of lines that says, like a subhashitam, it says, Spruha hi tavati karya satta bhagyasya yavati. So your spruha, your desire, should only be that much as your fate and fortune seems to make available to you. Spruha hi tavati karya satta bhagyasya yavati pada prasaranam karyam yavat prachhadanamshukam. You should spread your legs only as much as you have your mat available. So whatever mat or little carpet or cloth you lay on the ground and you are trying to lie down, spread your legs only as much as the mat or the carpet you have available with you. So spruha hi tavati karya satta bhagyasya yavati pada prasaranam karyam yavat prachhadanamshakam. So very nicely it is illustrated as how a man should recognize whatever seems to be uh, in his way as part of luck or fortune or whatever you call it, and essentially be happy in the sense that have no desire other than whatever is being automatically is coming their way. Of course, this doesn't mean one should not do their karma, one should not learn, one should not strive, and so on. But this is the internal state on how to recognize and in terms of desire and attachment. Elsewhere it is said, Yadrucha labhato nityam pritirya jayate nrunam tat santosham vidha prajna parignyanaika tatparaha brahmavaloka paryantat viraktya yallavet priyam sarvatra vigata sneha santosham paramam viduhu. So this is from another Upanishad where it is said, Yadrucha labhato nityam pritirya jayate nrunam. So whenever there is any labha that is coming, anything that is obtained without particularly trying or desiring for it, something that generally comes our way as we are engaged in our own nitya naimittika karmas, there whatever preeti one has, one pleasant feeling one gets whenever one obtains anything, that is tat santosham with prajnaha parignyanaika tatparaha. So that the wise people term as santosha. Then to what extent? Brahmavaloka paryantat viraktya yallabe priyam. So even the direct realization of Brahma, direct perception of Brahma, viraktya, with vairagya, without attachment to even that, and to of course all the other things. Brahmavaloka paryantat viraktya yallabe priyam sarvatra vigata sneha. Everywhere there is the desire, attachment is absent. Santosham paramam viduhu. So that is the paramam santosham, the higher superior santosham, as it is said. So this is the santosha as a niyama, and the importance of that to the yogi is evident from us trying to map it to the state of the chitta. So for example, if you think about if the santosha is not there, what is going to happen? So that is immediately tells us the importance of santosha to a yogi who is eyeball-like sensitivity to the state of the chitta. So if the santosha is not there, there will always be desire that will give rise to hatred towards things that are stopping you from obtaining your desire. So all the kama, krodha, lobha, mada, matsarya, all of those, the shadripus, immediately make themselves present where santosha is absent. So the importance of santosha is very self-evident to anyone who wants to have the state of the chitta in a sattvic state without the build-up of karmashaya, and hence its importance in the niyamas for the yogi, and as part of one having to have the yoga adhikara. If this is like a fundamental requirement, if this is not there, how can one justify the yoga adhikara? One can ask. So that is santosha as part of the niyamas.
So we are dealing with the second niyama, which is santosha. And you heard Vyasa's comment here, sannihita sadhanat adhikasya anupaditsa. So santosha is something where one must be contented with what one has, and it should not be like a materialistic person going after attaining contentment. So materialistic man is looking for getting content. Race has been going after getting contented in all eras. So here the contentment is to be contented with what one has rather than going for contentment. So that's the basic difference between the materialistic approach and adhyatmic or so-called spiritual approach. So here it's not just to remain contented, but adhikasya anupaditsa, that there is no desire for import of santosha, import of contentment. We are all trying to acquire contentment in our materialistic gravity. We are trying to become contented. So that is by having a desire to become contented. Now here, you heard from Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishad as well, Yadrucha labha santurta, which Srinit quoted. So Yadrucha labha means whatever the destined condition we have, destiny that we have, to be contented within it. So one is happy with what one has. Now usually there's a very thin line between to be happy and to be contented. Now the contentment here, when it is a vrata, understand here it is niyama, it is yoga basically. It is in yoga that you have to be contented. And then it is vrata, form of contentment. So to be contented with whatever one has by destiny, it should not be a purushartha, acquiring contentment, acquiring happiness. Now yadrucha labha, see, in our destiny, we have something to experience. Now that could be pain as well as pleasure. Now here in santosha, in culture of yoga, in the culture of adhyatma, moreover when it is anusthana, and then it is vrata as well. See, the contentment is even with whatever sorrow one has in life. See, because destiny is going to give both the things. The destiny is not only going to give you happiness, it's also going to give you agony. It's also going to give you sorrow. Now, if a mind is philosophized, when it is an actual sorrow, the philosophical mind will look at potentiality of contentment even in sorrow. It is a form of sorrow that we are experiencing, and our experience tells us that this is sorrow, and there can be no argument about it. But it is possible, with the foresight and insight that a yogi has, who is able to take the vrata, who is in vrata of niyamas, he will see potential happiness, delight, even in sorrow. Otherwise, we have two phases, one for sorrow and one for delight. When we are delightful, we know what is our face. When we are sorrowful, we know what is our face. We have a bitter face. We don't have insight and foresight to see that and say that there is a potential happiness for me, a potential gain for me. This is how the scheme of archetypal mind is. That when you are getting even sorrow, actual sorrow, it is not really sorrow if you have a right kind of vision of it. So yadrucha labha. Yadrucha is not only it is giving you labha, whatever is the yadrucha, it is a labha. It is for our good. So in philosophy of Santosha, it is taken as whatever is coming my way is for my good. It is actually good or potentially good. Even sorrow is potentially good for me. This is what the philosophized mind will be discerning. And that's why that expression of yadrucha labha santushta. Even if yadrucha is giving you alabha or sorrow, still there is a contentment. Like there is potential good for me in this. That is why the philosophized mind will not really get agonized. It might be a temporary agony, but immediately there is a realization, no, there is something good for me even in this. Something is going to get actualized which is good for me. And that is how the Santosha is practiced on philosophical level by a yogi. We will be only seeing psychologically. If there is a happiness, then I will only find contentment. I will not find contentment in something that is sad or something that is agonizing, because we do not have the insight to see what it has potentially, what our experience has potentially. It might be actually a psychologically sorrowful condition, but there is something good for me in store. And that is why they are kept in unalloyed contentment. It is not disturbed by the experiences. Even if they are sorrowful experiences, they don't really taint. They don't even create a dent. Basically, there is no desire for anything more. See the philosophized life. They will not be going after getting pleasures, avoiding sorrow. This is what our life is. We want to get happiness and avoid sorrows. So if you are destined to get sorrows and then we are trying to avoid it and then we'll fail to avoid it, then we have more sorrow. So yadrucha is a very philosophical term. So philosophers put it as the ichha of the antaryami, ichha of divinity. The yadrucha is taken as that. So divinity will not be having ill will for me. So apparently it is bad for me, but it is potentially having good for me. So that is the deeper meaning of yadrucha. The word is really fascinating, yadrucha. And yadrucha labhas santushtaha, Bhagavad Gita says. So one must be happy with whatever is actualizing in destiny. It might be psychologically good or psychologically bad, psychologically delightful or psychologically sorrowful. Now, it is psychologically like that. It is psychologically even sorrowful or even delightful. It is because of our asmita, which is a klesha, the I-ness. It is the I-ness which feels delight and sorrow. And that I-ness is asmita. That is a klesha. That is avidya. It is because of avidya we experience something as happy, something as sorrowful. But if that software of avidya is removed from the psyche and chitta, then it will not be anything of that kind. It will be for our good. Usually we select between, if it is to be it has to be selected between happiness and sorrowfulness. We will select happiness, because we don't sight good in sorrows. We don't have insight to discern or look or identify good in sorrow. We should be looking for good in our life, not happiness in our life. If you are opting for happiness, then you will get the other side of it as well. You can't accept one side of the coin and reject the other side of the coin. So the good, our good, ultimate good. So everywhere, philosopher sees ultimate good. Whatever comes his way, by way of destiny. So the yadrucha labha is a term with enormous depth. We should not just go by peripheral meaning of it. There is a lot of philosophical purport in yadrucha labha. Even the labha. The loss, even a loss is a gain. Ultimately, it is gainful, and that is why the yogis, the philosophers, are able to be in unalloyed bliss and contentment. They know these are all tiny, small waves and bubbles. They come up like a bubble, like a sorrow comes like a bubble. Ocean is not a bubble. Ocean gets bubbles. You'll find oceans on the ocean, in the ocean, the bubble coming up. Does the bubble stay eternally? We know how long the bubble stays. The sorrow is like a bubble, and then it is going to go away. It's not just coming and going. It has potential good. That's the philosophical mind behind looking at santosha. So, sannihita sadhanat, whatever is available with us. So the santosha will come from within, is to be understood. It is not to be acquired. There are two meanings to word be contented in what you have. One meaning is that even if it is not contentment, it should be taken as contentment. The other meaning is that even if it is not a psychological, psychical discontent, yet there is a contentment. There is a content in it because there is something potentially contentment there. So to be contented with what you have is a reconciliation. That will happen in the formative periods of philosophical life. So we will be contented. We will take it as contentment. But a yogi will see, he has the insight, he is able to scan a proficient philosophized mind, will see the content in even in sorrow. So there is enormous philosophy in this contentment. And the yogi must be contented because look, if you are discontented, that is why the yamas are going to get violated. Why do we commit himsa, embrace himsa, or why the himsa happens? There is discontent. Why does the asatya happen? It is discontent. Why the steya happens? It is discontent. Why abrahmacharya happens? It is discontent. Why the aparigraha happens and aparigraha gets violated? It is discontent. So this discontent has enormous efficacy. So we must be yogis are afraid of any discontent coming to them, touching to them. So for us, it is a lesson. Beware of discontent, because if you get discontent, your yoga will be detonated. Whatever yoga you are in, whatever yoga you have acquired, it will be blasted. It will be detonated. So we must be taking care of this contentment. So santosha is so important, particularly in yogic pursuit, adhyatmic pursuit, spiritual pursuit, because that is a very strong detonator. That's why santosha has very deep purport. It's not just render it as contentment and just move to the next topic of the Yoga Sutra. This is such a fundamental thing. No yama niyama will stand without santosha. So try to psychoanalyze every yama and every niyama. If it has to be properly yogic packaging, how santosh is so important. Because of santosh, even the tapas will be detonated. No Swadhyay. Swadhyay also will be spoiled. Ishwar Pranidhan also will be spoiled. Everything will be spoiled because of asantosha. So understand how fundamental is santosha. So it has such a deeper purport. Okay.
So let's moving on to the next one, which is tapa. So Vyasa says tapo dvandva sahanam. So what is tapa? Tapa is dvandva sahanam. Sahanam means being able to stand, being able to tolerate something without getting tormented, without getting disturbed by it. That is sahanam. So sahanam of what? Dvandva. So what is this dvandva? So Vyasa himself illustrates that. He says dvandvascha jigatsa pipase शीतोष्णे स्थानासने काष्ठमौन आकारमौने च. So Vyasa does not define Dvandva, he gives examples. So Dvandva is usually translated as dualities. But here, so dualities are often taken as opposites. But if you look at Vyasa's examples, they are not necessarily opposites. So the Shitoshne is opposite, means hot and cold. Shita means cold, Ushna means hot. Jigatsa pipase is hunger and thirst. Sthanasane is standing and sitting. So the hunger and thirst, they are not opposites, right? So that is explained by another Tikakara. He says, Yadyapi Shitoshnadi vat paraspara viruddhatvam bubuksha pipasayoho nasti tathapi mithunavadeva paribhashika dvandvata. So he says this is paribhashika dvandvata mithunavadeva, because they come in pairs in our vyavahara, in normal usage. Vyasa has included them also in dvandva. So hunger and thirst, so ability to have sahanam, being able to tolerate that, not being disturbed by those. Similarly, shitoshne, hot and cold, being able to tolerate that, not being troubled and tormented by those. Sthanasane, standing, sitting. Essentially, this refers to various bodily positions that one is able to withstand. Then, kashthamauna akaramaunecha. Oh, this is interesting. So, maunam is a vrata. Maunam essentially is usually understood as not to speak. So, not to speak, not to communicate. Once one takes this vrata, the idea behind that is one can go inwards. Because anyway, we cannot communicate. So, that is a vrata that one adopts. Now, kashtha maunam is one in which there is no form of communication, no gesticulations, no indications, no writing, no hand symbols, and so on. So completely cutting off all communication in the period of the vrata. Akara mauna is mostly about speech, but one can take the liberty of indicating if they want something and so on. So being able to have a dvandva sahanam with respect to these as well, being able to adopt this vrata and tolerate that. So tapa is this dvandva sahanam. In addition, says Vyasa, tapa is also vratani. Vratani chaisham yatha yogam krichra chandrayana santapana adini. So there are certain vratas that have come by tradition. Examples given here are Krishra vrata, Chandrayana vrata, Santapana vrata. So, and there are certain rules that you sort of, you have to be up at this time, then you have to limit your food intake to so much, then you have to spend your time doing so and so. So there are different vratas. So those are also tapa, says Vyasa. And then there is an interesting word used here is yatha yogam. It is not just vrata, vratani cha esham yatha yogam kritsha chandrayana santapanadini. So now what is this yatha yogam? So yatha yogam in terms of a Sanskrit compound word, you will normally expand it to yatha yogam yukte yogam anatikramya. So, to understand this, sharirasya avikara bhava rupam yogam anatikramyeti yatha yogam. So, the yatha yogam, to loosely translate, it would be to the extent of one's capacity. So, Vyasa clearly says here, and this also appears in other yoga texts, that while tapas are to be undertaken, it has to be according to one's capacity. This extreme torment of oneself in the name of tapa is, in most texts you will see, it is not sanctioned. Moderation is prescribed. Wisdom is expected. So here also that is brought about by yatha yogam. The vrata could get intensified as one's capacity increases, but one has to be cognizant of one's capacity, and because ultimately this is for yoga, and this is for the reduction of karmashaya, reduction of avidya, not bringing in chittamalam, not bringing in klesha, and ultimately it is samadhi bhavanartham. So, and a tapa that is not judicious, which is beyond one's capacity, will result in raga, dvesha, krodha, and so on, or torment, which is going to lead to karmashaya. And therefore, that wisdom is expected, and that is brought about by the word here called yatha yogam. So, in brief, tapa is one aspect is dvandva sahanam. So, often you will see, or you would have read about yogis, say standing in vrikshasana for in the Puranas, it is hundreds of years and thousands of years and so on, or living only on only food available from trees, then only water, then only air, and so on. And then other vratas coming from tradition. All of these are about, it's a vidhi, so it is about an internal purification, internal strengthening, so that one does not get affected, one is not easily doesn't stray from his path, and that capacity needs to be built up, a purification needs to happen, and that is how tapa plays a role. We did discuss tapa in quite some depth in the first sutra of the second chapter, where we said tapasvadhyaya ishvara pranidhanani kriya yoga. So here, with this, Vyasa is again describing tapa in 2 lines, and we have also seen that to some extent. So that is about tapa.
So tapo dvandva sahanam, very brief, aphoristic kind of statement of Vyasa here. And dvandvas, as you just now heard, they are either experiential dualities or notional conceptual dualities. And then therefore he gives few examples. Dvandvascha jigatsa pipase. Hunger and thirst are not dualities in experience, but we all experience this. We cannot be putting on the hunger too long. We are agonized by hunger. So also the thirsty condition. We cannot put up with thirsty condition too long. So usually between an adult and a child, we can see this. When a child is wanting water, it will have tantrums. But adults do not have tantrums. They can put up with it for some time. They can still tolerate it for some time. But a baby, a child cannot tolerate with hunger and thirst. It will immediately start crying. And we are like that. Even if we are adults, we are like that compared to those who are on philosophized life track or lifestyle, you might say. They have greater tolerance, forbearance. They put up with it easily. So in yoga, you need to have little more greater capacity to put up with these dualities, so-called dualities, either the experiential dualities or conceptual dualities, such as jigatsa, pipasa, shitoshna, hot and cold. Then sthanasana is quite interesting. If we are standing too long, after a while, we look for sitting. We look to sit somewhere. We want to have a seat somewhere. If we are seated too long, we want to stand up sometimes, at some stage. So too long of seated condition, we get up and stand up. Too long standing condition, we look for some seat to be seated. So this is how we are so much vulnerable to these conditions. We can be standing not too long. We can be seated not too long. If we are standing, we find comfort in seated condition. If we are seated too long, we see the comfort in standing condition. So standing is comfortable as well as uncomfortable. Seated condition is comfortable as well as uncomfortable. It all depends upon the time span. Now, essentially, they are not comfortable or uncomfortable. So understand where is the comfort and discomfort, because of which we don't put up with the condition. So the tapa here is to be able to put up with it. We must develop greater capacity to put up. Like materialistic people will not be able to put up with any sorrow, but philosophized people will be able to put up with sorrow. Not only they are able to put up with sorrow, because putting up is also a negative word. To tolerate is also a negative word. Yogi will see the comfort there also. So there is no question of tolerance later, because tolerance is not a good word. Tolerate people, intolerate people. They say tolerate people are good. We are tolerating. But there is something better than tolerance. It is acceptance. It is looking at the good qualities in that which we don't tolerate, because of which. Absence of good qualities, if we do not see anything good, then we don't tolerate. It is because we don't see good in it. But if you see good in it, then it's not that you are tolerating, you are appreciating. So, this again, there is a lot of philosophy in Dvandva Sahanam. It is not just developing tolerance or developing robustness, etc., etc. So those qualities will help you tolerate the dualities to some extent. But then these are dvandvas on plane of body, on plane of mind, on the plane of psyche and consciousness. So on the plane of body, you need to be strong. If you are not strong, then you will not be able to tolerate any physical duality, such as hot and cold. But on the plane of mind, it's a different realm. And then on the plane of chitta and consciousness, it is further different plane. So the Dvandva Sahanam is so important, to be steadfast in one's pursuit. And for the pursuit to be successful, you must be having Dvandva Sahanam. If you are not able to tolerate or put up with it, then you will revoke it. If you revoke it, that means you will not be getting the fruit. See, if I plant a tree, mango tree, and wait for 2-3 days and become intolerant, there is no mango coming up, there is no sapling and plant and tree coming up, and I become intolerant and then stop it. I will not get mango for any time. I will not have patience, wait for sapling to arrive, and then for it to become a plant, and for it to become a tree, and then for it to grow, and then the mango will come at some point in time. It is intolerance that we are having in our modern life, modern momentum of life, modern culture of life. We are losing tolerance. So, Dvandva Sahanam becomes more significant to our era, to our times, because we are used to something very instant and instantaneous. This is how the culture has come up, that we are not able to put up with any time. We want everything with a snap of finger. So the gravities that we are we're living in today, these gravities definitely entail some tapa acquirement. The power of tapa acquirement, because otherwise we are not going to have any tolerance for any delay, because we are used to instantaneous things, instant things. This is the modern culture. So this gains more importance today. Then it will be more paying to us. If we have patience, we will have steadfastness. If we have steadfastness, then the fruits will come our way. But if we are not steadfast, then we won't persist. If we don't persist and persevere, naturally we don't desire for the fruit of it. So in yoga, you need to carry out this practice over a long time, which I have heard in the first chapter. Satati kala nairantarya satkara sevitaha drudabhumi. The abhyasa has to be continued over a longer time. Is it possible without patience? Is it possible with impatience? So, when we say it should be done patiently, that means you can psychoanalyze that means we are developing some capacity to put up with dualities. The ups and downs will come there. We'll have to put up with it. And we should not be harassed and tormented by ups and downs. So, Shitoshna, one is to put up with it. And the other meaning of it is to be smoothly negotiating it. We don't feel that there is a turmoil or upheaval. So also Shuddha Pipasa, if you are able to put up with it, the patience always pays. And why the patience is not there? Because we cannot put up with the dualities, dvandvas, and therefore this tapas becomes very important. And then you heard about the vratas, Krishna, Chandrayana, Santapanadi. So these are vratas mentioned in Dharma Shastra. So that we develop this regulated condition, we develop that proof condition. We are not proof to these dvandvas, the dualities. We are not proof to dvandvas, therefore we get vexed and tormented. And in order to develop that quality to be putting up with all these upheavals and dualities, either physical, psychological, or conceptual, there are certain observances. This is what is observance. And if these vratas are taken up, then we slowly develop this power to be steadfast and not going up and down with all these upheavals and with these dualities. So the Kruchka, Chandrayana, Santapanadi are the vratas which are with reference to the life, how to conduct our life for 3 days, 5 days, 8 days, 10 days, 15 days, 1 month, etc., etc. And it also brings the food aspect. What to eat, how much to eat. And Vyasa, very important to say Yatha Yoga. Because usually the purpose of this austerity means that it is gymnastics of resoluteness, gymnastics of will and volition. Now when the gymnastics of will and volition are there, it is highly probable that we will be indiscreet. And that should not be taking place. That we are not indiscreet about these observances. We have to observe something for tapa, for dvandva sahanam. We have to observe something. Now, when we have to observe, we only identify the resoluteness. So here, Vyasa makes it clear that we should not be going overboard. There is every chance that we go overboard when it's a gymnastics of resoluteness or resolution or will and volition. So it is important to have yatha yogam, suitable, proper. So our food should be also such that it is suitable for our yoga. The quantum of food should be such that it is suitable for our yoga. Now, just as in the case of that food, and all students of yoga understand that's how important it is to have light food, simple food, and optimum food rather than maximum food, eating maximum food. So that is about the food which goes to the belly. But then there is also reference to food going to your psyche, consciousness, intelligence, internal aspects of mind. So that food also should be yatha yoga and not indiscreet. Because in practice of tapa, if you do not really understand tapa in proper in perspective, then we tend to go overboard. When we go overboard, then it's going to backfire and misfire. So if the restraint is excessive to our capacity, then after a while we'll break free. And when we break free, we can't imagine what we will end up doing. So that will be very devastating. Therefore, the dosage, like medicine is taken in proper dosage. You can't say, I want to get better quick and therefore I will take 3 days dosage on one day itself or one time itself. It's not that you'll quickly recover, but you will go from bad to worse. So here this is something like medicine, yatha yogam. It's a discrete dosage which depends upon our capacity, our potentials, our energies, our dispositions, our samskars. So it's a very, very deeper concept, yatha yogam. We have to observe Prushta, Chandaya, Santapanadi, Vratas, which are mentioned in Dharma Shastra. Because tapas will come elsewhere. See, for a Kshatriya warrior, they might also go for austerities. Now, they are going for austerities to become perfected in Kshatriya Dharma. So their quantum will be different. Perhaps the discretion will not come in there. But in yogam, you have to take care of the chitta. So the precise mathematics is necessary there. If the mathematics is not proper, if there is indiscretion to slightest amount, the yoga will be devastated. And therefore the word yatha yogam is so important. We believe in hard work. Everywhere we believe in hard work. So when it is hard work, it depends upon what is in your goal. What is your target that you are targeting. It doesn't consider your potentials. What are you targeting at? So this is what happens in worldly realm tapas. People perform tapas in every realm. You want to be a good businessman, good industrialist, good sportsman, whatever, good wrestler or whatever. You go overboard. You can go overboard there, but not in yoga. So it is so important because vrata comes in dharma. The tapa comes in dharma. Tapa comes in every realm. In every purushartha, there will be tapas. So that you will excel. But in yoga, you can't have the same principle adopted. It should be yatha yogam because you are dealing with chitta, which is so delicate thing in one sense. And that's why the word yatha yogam has a lot of importance. So these tapas are kayik, vachik, manasik. If you look into Bhagavad Gita, you will get the classification, kayik, vachik, manasik tapas, sattvic, rajasic, tamasik tapas. It's all so important to understand the concept of tapas that has come in dharma, that has come in jnana, that has come in adhyatma, that has come in paramartha, that has come in yoga. And we have to see the distinction there. For yogam, what is the dosage? What is really suitable? Otherwise, in tapas, we have kind of tapas, panchagni sevanam. They put fire on all sides. In the summer months, noon time, the sun is over the head, and then they are sitting with fire on all four sides. So that's a tapas which will give you a kind of excellence. But that is not going to work in yoga. It will work elsewhere. You will become Superman by putting up with fire on all 5 sides. So, in yoga, we should know what is sought after. In dharma, what is sought after. The tapas will come everywhere. Tapas comes from martial activity to any what you call as fine art activity. So it will come in different modes. So in yoga also we have to consider specially how the tapas will come. So this information, knowledge will come to you by satsanga, sadhana sangha, shastra sangha. Sattvic ahar vihar achar vichar. They will tell you where to perform tapa. To develop this, you can't be going for mountaineering and this and that, etc. And say they are right to develop this tolerance, etc. So it is for the purpose of yoga. So tapas again is a very wide concept. It comes everywhere. As students of yoga, we should know that. To know the tapas of yoga, we should know what are tapas in other realms, understand them, why are they there, and why the tapas is in yoga. And then we will be having proper discretion, proper justification, proper identification of tapas. So yatha yogam is again a forestic term which has to be penetrated. Okay.
Yes, and as it was said in the Bhagavad Gita, there is the Shariram Tapa, Vangmayam Tapa of speech, and Manasam Tapa of the mind. So this you will find in the 17th chapter. And similarly, there is the Satvikam Tapa, the Rajasam Tapa, and the Tamasam Tapa, again in the 17th chapter. We have seen some of that in context of Tapa or Vak in previous sessions, but this is again worth looking into in the context of this particular sutra. Okay, so after tapas comes swadhyaya. So Vyasa says, swadhyayo moksha shastranam adhyayanam pranavajapova. So it is the adhyayanam, study. And usually swadhyaya is rendered as self-study. And it is not incorrect, because swakiyatvena vihita adhyayaha swadhyayaha. So it is a diligent, sincere study that one does on their own of what? The moksha shastras. So the moksha shastra is a very, very broad term. So it comprises of all the Vedic corpus, then the Vedangas, and the Darshana Shastra, the Puranas, the Itihasa. So all of them comes under Moksha Shastra one way or another. So, and traditionally we have discussed a bit that this was part of the, in some sense, the curriculum or the syllabus. And even things that seem focused elsewhere, other Vidyas, whether Ayurveda or Dhanurvidya and so on, there is always, in the Indian context, there is always an angle of the moksha as the Purushartha and Paramartha that are tied to them. And you will always see references of that, whether it be stories, whether it be Vyakaranam, or any of the more worldly Laukika Vidyas. There is always this angle of moksha in the Indian context. So moksha shastranam adhyayanam swadhyayah, and this is this adhyayanam. If you look at the discussion around Vyakaranam and Nyaya and so on, there is an extreme nuanced, subtle, refined discussion, and it is believed that this kind of very, very careful reasoning and being very careful about one's speech, the precision of one's understanding, in some sense, it is cleansing and purifying and refining the buddhi and the manas building an appreciation of the layers of knowledge. And we have seen that in terms of every darshana has this notion of what is pramana, and then the different types of reasoning and so on. So all of that. So when it comes here in this context, it is under an assumption that this is a student who has learned Nyaya, Tarka, Vyakaranam, some aspects of Mimamsa, and so on, and then Vedanta. So the adhyayanam of all of that by somebody who has the necessary qualifications, and as the adhyayana is happening, there is more and more refinement that happens. So that is the Moksha Shastranam adhyayanam. And Pranava Japova. So Pranava Japa, Pranava means the Omkara, and we have seen the sutra Tasya Vachakaha Pranavaha. So the Ishvara, we have seen in the first chapter, he is the Vachya, and the Vachaka sound form is Pranava. So the Japa of that in itself, and we have seen the sutra that says Tad Japas Tadartha Bhavanam. So that it is implicit that the Japa leads to Artha Bhavanam. And the Artha, or the implication, the purport and the meaning of the Pranava again is the entire Moksha Shastra. Because Pranava is at the center of all of it, and it is supposed to stand for everything. So therefore the Pranava Japa is also, because it says Pranava Japova. So both Moksha Shastranam Adhyayanam or Pranava Japa, both of them are included in Swadhyaya. And at different, yogis at different levels, so to speak, in their path, may devote time to Moksha Shastra Adhyayanam and Pranava Japa. And both of these and all of this is included in Swadhyaya as a niyama in the Ashtanga Yoga scheme. So that is about Swadhyaya.
So Swadhyaya literally means self-study. Swa Vishayak Adhyayanam. The object of your study should be Swa. Swa means oneself. Oneself for you and me is me. So this is study about me. This is study about I, myself. Now, for starkly materialistic person, what is me? What is he himself is to him, or she herself is to her? That is one thing. But when it is investigated, who really am I? Then you will see that in this Swadhyaya, you will come to realize that there is Adibhautik, Adidaivik, Adhyatmic components which are constituting my subjective entity. And therefore, there are the Adibhautik will be the thing in which a materialistic person will be stuck. This is my body, this is made up of body matters, and this is what me is. But then little inquiry will reveal, even a rational inquiry will reveal that no, something is beyond that. Because this I go through stages of consciousness. Awakeful, dreamy, dormant, and then there is the fourth state of consciousness. So modern science, psychology also speaks about four states of consciousness. So it is not me who is only in awakeful state. What am I in my dream state of consciousness? What am I in dormant state of consciousness? So Jagrata, Swapna, Sushupti, Turiya. So little rational inquiry will divulge us that this is not me as limited as I think about myself while I am in a wakeful state. So the inquiry will deepen, and that's how you will realize Adibhautik, Adidaivik, Adhyatmic components of the Swa, the self-inquiry, inquiry about oneself will divulge you that you have to have some understanding about its constitution. So there is Adidevic constitution, means there are Deva Devatas who are constituting me. I am a terrestrial person constituted by celestial powers, is what esoteric anatomy tells us. So this Svadhyaya also is implying that there is Devatopasana. And that is why if you look at the fruit of Swadhyaya, Ishta Devata Samprayogaha. And one more thing, we have been considering yamas and niyamas. When we consider them really, we should also have at sight the fruit of each. Then we will be able to understand each of these yamas and niyamas properly, as implied in the text here. So when we discuss ahimsa, it's not just trying to decipher what ahimsa is, but we have to look at the fruit of it and then try to understand what is the real dimension of ahimsa here. So the fruit at sight in our study, in our investigation, will help us go better in our pursuit of understanding yamas and niyamas. It's not that the sutra is coming later, therefore we'll study later. So when we study the later part of this yama niyamas, where solutions are coming, ahimsa pratisthayam tattannau vairabhyagaha, satya pratisthayam kriyaphala shretam, etc., etc. So the 5 yamas, 5 niyamas have their separate fruits. That is so important to really have deeper insight, deeper inquiry into yamas and niyamas. So we are constituted by Adidevic forces. When they are Adidevic forces, they are definitely worth worship. So they are worshipped. That will help us get some bounty from them. And then Moksha Shastranam Adhyayanam. We come closer to ourselves when we are in Moksha Shastra Adhyayanam. It is not we are reading a subject. Like when you read a subject of economics and politics and physics and chemistry, you don't become economics and politics and physics and chemistry. When you are studying mathematics, you don't become mathematics. But this is such a subject matter that is available in Oriental wisdom called Moksha Shastram. So Moksha Shastram has reference to you yourself. It is not just the goal of liberation and salvation and emancipation. And understanding what is emancipation, what is liberation, and what is kaivalya, what is moksha, and what is nirvana. It takes you closer to yourself. This is so typical about Moksha Shastra, that it gets you closer to yourself. It doesn't get you closer to the subject. If you read economics, study economics, will get closer to economics subject. If you study mathematics, you'll go closer to mathematics, the subject, or physics, the subject. But Moksha Shastra, it will take you closer to you. This is typical of Moksha Shastra. That's how it stands out amongst all the Shastras. So, the divinity is in Moksha Shastra according to divinity itself. That's the Parama Shastra. The greatest of all Shastras is Moksha Shastra. So Moksha Shastra takes you closer to Sua. That is why the Swadhyaya is not that you must read Vedas, Vedantas, Itihas, Purana, Shastras, etc., Yoga, Sankhya. It will take you closer to Sua. It will take you closer to yourself. They are not objective Shastras. They are subjective Shastras, subjectivistic Shastras. And therefore they are so much relevant in Swadhyaya. Then Pranava Japova. Pranava is his name. One of the countless names of Ishvara, Bhagavan, is Pranava. And it's most exalted as well. As etymologically we are told about it, Prakarshena, Nuyata Snuyata iti Pranavaha. But that is one of the names, and outstanding name. There are so many other names as well. So, Pranava Japa means Bhagwan Nama Japa. Pranava Japa means Ishwar Nama Japa. Because Tasya Vachaka Pranavaha. So, Ishwara Nama is Pranava. Bhagwan Nama is Pranava. but he has other names as well. So when we go to Nama Sadhana, Pranava Sadhana is a Nama Sadhana. And in Nama Sadhana we get so many Namas. And all these Nama Sadhanas take closer to ourselves. I remember a mystic poet saying, what is after all Rama? Rama, Sri Rama. It might be taken as a deity. It might be taken as a supreme deity. But Atma Rama is also Atma Rama. That means he is within me. So suppose you are doing Rama Nama, it's not that you will be more devoted to Rama, getting devotion for Rama, you will become Rama Bhakta. No, you will go closer to yourself. Because Rama is really the yourself. He is the innermost entity in our core principle of existence. That's why he's called Atma Rama. So Rama Nama is Swadhyaya. It is not that you are remembering Rama and taking the name of Rama. Rama is really essence of you. Mysticism says Rama is essence of you. I remember Sri Ramdas in one of his compositions saying, whatever is Rupa of Rama is my Swarupa. Rama te Rupa, te maze Swarupa. Te maze Swarupa. Rama te Rupa, te maze Swarupa. This is the statement that comes in a composition of Sri Ramadasa. So our essence is Rama. He is not in his indweller means is Antaryami. That means he is regulating us. He is our informer. Rama is our informer. So Rama Nama will take us closer to ourselves. We think we are in the Nama of Rama, but it will take more closer to ourselves, our core principle. That is what the Nama Sadhana does. That is why Pranava Mantra Japa does. Pranava is Nama. And that's why it takes you closer. It's not that it is something different and it is part of Swadhyay. No, it is very much essentially part of Swadhyay because it takes you closer to Swa. That's the Rahasya. That's the Rahasya of Pranava. That's the Rahasya of Nama, Bhagwan Nama. Any Nama of Bhagavanta, any Nama of Bhagavan is really the Swa in us. There is no deeper aspect of Swa beyond that Antaryami. And that is Bhagwan Nama. That is Bhagavan and his Nama. Because that is his denoter. So there is Advaita between the Nama Nami. In our case, there is no Advaitam between Rama Nami. There is no non-dualism between me and my name. Because I can change my name. And we do that these days. We change our names. But the Nama-Nami Sambandham in Japa is such that there is non-duality. As a matter of fact, Nami is said to be less superior than the Nami. Rama and Rama-Nama, what is greater? Nama is greater than Rama according to mysticism. Because Rama-Nama is a savior. Rama is not going to save us. Rama-Nama is going to save us. So Nama is greater than Nami. This is marvelous mysticism behind the Nama, concept of Nama in Adhyatma. Anyway, that's why Pranava Japo Va, Pranavadi Japas. And Pranavadi, Adi, means any Nama of Bhagavan. So that is what is Swadhyaya is, because it takes closer to ourselves. It is not an object outside us. Deity is such an entity. It is not object outside us. It seems to be for a layman. The God is in the temple, the God is in some form, and then we treat that form as God, that image as God, or the name as God. but that is the core aspect within us. That's the Adhyatma. So that's why it is part of Swadhyaya, self-study. Okay.
Yeah, we'll stop here and continue with the sutra in the next session. So let's recite the shlokas on Guruji. Stop. वैज्ञानिकं प्रवक्तृत्व आसनेषु कलाविदं योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञं वन्देऽहं सुन्दरं गुरुं योगवृक्षो हि लोकेऽस्मिन् यत्प्रेरणेन वर्धितः योगाचार्यगुरो तुभ्यं सुन्दराय नमो नमः. Thank you.
Namaskar.